Okay, so as a preamble, this PowerPoint was one that was originally done in 2019, and shame on me for not changing the date because we updated it after Public Act 2129 came out. But this was a presentation that we gave for the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities on affordable housing. And what I'm hoping to do tonight is sort of give you a general overview so that in my mind, there's a greater understanding of the purposes behind the Affordable Housing Act and just providing for affordable housing in general. Next slide. And so I've already introduced myself. I've been a municipal land use attorney for 25 years. So I'm down in the trenches with you, dealing with this on a daily basis. Next slide. And what would a presentation from an attorney be without a disclaimer that this does not constitute legal advice, but is for educational purposes only? Next slide. Okay, so as you may or may not know, and again, anybody's free to stop me if I'm starting to get into stuff that you know cold and you don't want to waste time listening to me opine about it. But Section 830G of the Connecticut General Statutes is what governs the Affordable Housing Act. Now, what you may not know is that affordable housing initiatives actually started in the 1980s. And it was around this time that the crisis of affordable housing really became apparent to our legislators. And in particular, to be honest, it really was precipitated from Fairfield County. Why is that? Because as we will talk about more as we go on, is that affordable housing is really a synonym for workforce housing. And what they were finding, especially in Fairfield County, was that the people who provided services to the town, the people who worked in the town, the teachers, the firemen, the policemen, could not afford to live in the communities where they worked. And it was becoming really difficult for them to get the assistance that they needed. So there was a Blue Ribbon Commission that was convened, and for the purpose of trying to decide how they could address the situation. And what happened was the Affordable Housing Land Use Appeals Act came out of that, and that's the 830G Connecticut General Statutes that we've been talking about. That became effective in 1990. So the other thing you should know is that 830G, by Supreme Court precedent, has been defined as a remedial statute that has to be liberally construed in favor of those whom the legislature is intended to benefit. What does that mean? If there's a situation in front of you where it's a balancing act, tie goes to the individual who is seeking the affordable housing. Since 830G was adopted, it has been strengthened, most recently by Public Act 2129, and become even more stringent. Not to mention the fact that there is now a host of precedent of court cases interpreting the act, which again really has circumscribed 830G and made it even more, I guess, ironclad in favor of an affordable housing developer that comes to your town. Next slide. Okay, so what does the Affordable Housing Act do? Basically, just as in a nutshell, what happens is that if somebody brings an affordable housing development to the town of Portland, they are entitled under the Affordable Housing Act to circumvent your zoning regulations with some limited exceptions, which means they have sort of a carte blanche. And again, we'll talk about some of those exceptions. But the concern about that is that towns that even want affordable housing are very concerned that they have lost complete control over the development. And so we will talk about ways to sort of resolve that. By definition, an affordable housing development is either A, assisted housing, or B, a set-aside development. So what is assisted housing? It's housing that will receive financial assistance under a government program to subsidize. So it's what we all sort of think about as Section 8 housing, right? Where the rents and everything are subsidized. A set-aside development is a development where at least 30% of the total proposed dwelling units have to be subject to deeds or other covenant restrictions for at least 40 years. It used to be 30, now it's 40, such that those dwellings are sold or rented at or below which prices which will preserve the units as affordable housing for 40 years, okay? What does that mean? An occupant or buyer must have an income level less than or equal to 80% of the median income, and at least 15% of the affordable units have to be sold or rented to persons and families whose income is less than or equal to 60% of the median income. Okay. Now, the difference between this and subsidized housing is that you're not entitled to subsidized housing, Section 8 housing, unless you're at 50% or less than the median income. So again, this is not Section 8 housing. This is workforce housing. Okay. And to be affordable, the occupant or buyer has to be able to expend no more than 30% of their annual income towards the rent or mortgage, including utilities. Okay. Next slide, please. So this is an example. Let's say that a developer comes to Portland and they're proposing 120 units. What the Affordable Housing Act would require if they're bringing in a set-aside development is that 36 of those units have to be dedicated to the affordable restrictions we talked about, the 40 years with incomes at below 80% of the median. And at least 18 units must be dedicated to affordable restrictions that bring you in at the 60% or below median income, okay? And all prices and rents have to be set so that the qualifying owner or buyer will spend no more than 30% of their annual income or housing. On housing, excuse me. Next slide, please. So why should municipalities care? Well, of course, there's the public policy considerations. As we've talked about already, Connecticut lacks affordable housing. And in 2021, when we put this PowerPoint together, Connecticut ranked 10% most expensive housing wage in the country. And what is that? That means that in 2021, you had to make $27.37 per hour to afford a 2-bedroom rental home. You have to work 2.3 full-time jobs at minimum wage to afford a 2-bedroom home, okay? And the fair market rent for 2-bedroom homes on average was $1,423. That's pretty shocking, right? I don't know how many of you have family members, young family members, who are struggling to find housing that they can afford. And I'm gonna say, obviously COVID had a great impact on our fair market rents. I think you probably heard about the explosion in rentals and what people are charging for rentals now. So again, if we really want to keep young talent in the state, if we really want to keep our workforce whole, we do have to take affordable housing seriously because it is a significant problem. Okay. Now you're subject to the Affordable Housing Act unless your municipality can establish that 10% of your housing units throughout your town are already affordable. And I'm going to tell you, Dan, I did some research today, but I couldn't find the list. Do you know what percentage Portland is at?
My understanding is we're a little bit over 9.
Okay, so you're pretty close, but you're not quite there. And we'll talk about this a little bit more, but what happens is once you hit the 10%, if you apply to the state and they do the analysis and you provide the information, you can put a moratorium on affordable housing developments under the 830G for 4 years. Okay, but again, it's it's a hefty calculation, and it takes some work, but you're pretty close. That's not too bad. Next slide, please. So, okay, so the minimum threshold again is 10%. And the calculation, and again, it's very complicated. So I can't sit here and give you all, absolutes on what would or would not qualify in your town. But just generally, it's assisted housing, housing financed by CHFA, housing subject to the deed restrictions or covenants that we talked about, mobile manufactured homes located in a mobile manufactured home park that has covenants or deed restrictions, and mobile manufactured homes located in resident-owned mobile manufactured home parks. Okay, so once a year, the Connecticut Department of Housing has to post a listing of all municipalities in the state which meet the 10% threshold. And those, again, municipalities are deemed exempt from the Affordable Housing Act. And I think you saw probably on the previous slide, there was a dearth of towns that actually met this threshold, at least in 2021. Next slide, please. So here's some examples of towns that actually were exempt in 2021. So you can see again, out of 169 towns, it's not a lot. Next slide, please. Okay, so as I said, 830G allows developers to come in with affordable housing projects that meet the criteria. And in doing so, they get to be exempt from your local zoning regulations. What does that mean? It means everything from not having to meet your driveway ordinance, to not having to meet your density requirements, to building lot coverage, anything. It really runs the gamut. And again, there are very, very limited exceptions to this, which over the years have become even more limited. It used to be, and there was a case that I handled for Glastonbury many years ago, where we were able to establish that we shouldn't have to be subject to an affordable housing land use appeal for property that had been designated on the town's plan of conservation and development as open space. And I'm going to tell you right now, I do not think that case would be decided the same way today. They've really restricted it. So a couple of the exceptions might be if there simply was not the infrastructure to support it. If you didn't have water or sewer or some other type of septic that could handle what's being proposed, would be an example. Significant public safety concern. But again, I mean, it would have to be that the development was in some way directly related to a direct harm. And that would be, in most cases, very difficult to prove. So it's extremely limited. And so I say to you, if an affordable housing appeal comes to you, your assumption should be that it would likely be upheld by a court. So again, it allows for any density, allows you to escape the zoning regulations, any location, right? It doesn't matter if what you've designated that particular land as. The one exception to that is that if you have an industrial zone that does not permit housing of any kind, that will allow you to escape the Affordable Housing Appeals Act. Okay. They also could come in with a zone change, with a submission of a concept plan per any municipal regulatory requirements. Again, in order to create a multifamily zone where one never existed before. And again, you would be subject to the act. Next slide, please. Okay, before I go on to this, should I ask if there's any questions just on the preamble here? All right, so here's what I'm going to do. If you have a question, I'm going to count on you to raise your hand. Everybody knows how to do that, right? And if I don't see a hand raised, then I'm going to assume you have no questions. Fair? Okay. So what agencies are covered by the Affordable Housing Act? So it's any zoning, planning and zoning, zoning board of appeals, or other agencies exercising zoning or planning authority. What does that mean? In some of the cities and towns I work with, like the Board of Aldermen is the zoning authority, okay? What's excluded are water pollution control authorities and inland wetlands and watercourses commissions, okay? So obviously the legislature realized that they can't allow affordable housing that in some way is going to impact negatively the wetlands in derogation of the Inland Wetlands Act, or put the town in peril with its sewerage systems. Next slide, please. So what applications are covered? It's any application: site plan, zone change, subdivision, special permit, text amendments, variance applications. They're all subject to the Affordable Housing Act. Next slide, please. So something that's really significant about the Affordable Housing Act that I'm always called upon to review, and boy, it can be complicated, is that they are required to put together an affordability plan to basically establish that they meet the requirements for the Affordable Housing Act. What does that mean? They have to put together a plan that designates who's going to be responsible for administration of the affordability plan, okay? An affirmative fair market housing plan governing the sale or rental dwelling units, meaning they've got to tell you who their target audience is going to be and how they're going to reach out to them. A sample calculation of the maximum sales or rents for the intended affordable dwelling units. And that's where it gets really complicated, because there's a formula that you have to apply. You know, as we talked about, there's an 80% requirement, a 60% requirement, and that all requires, and then no more than 30% of their income required. So all of that requires significant calculations, a description of the project sequence, and how the affordable dwelling units are going to be built and offered for occupancy, the general location of such units within the proposed development, any draft zoning regulations, conditions of approval, deeds, restricted covenants that are going to be part of that affordability plan. So it's a very comprehensive plan, and you'll be called upon to look at these. I usually get them first to critique, but they can be complex. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know why that's happening. I apologize. Next slide, please. Autumn. So what happens? Let's say somebody comes in with an affordable housing development and you deny it for whatever reason. The difference between this and a typical application that comes before you is that it's often the applicant's burden to prove that you didn't have a basis for your denial, right? When you go up on appeal. In these types of affordable housing appeals, the burden shifts. So now it's on you as the board or commission that's making the decision to establish your burden for denying it, which is significant because now it's on you, okay? And the burden is defined as necessary to protect substantial public interest in health, safety, or other matters which the commission may legally consider. What does that mean? Well, it means the Planning and Zoning Commission can't deny an affordable housing application because it's going to impact wetlands. That's not within your jurisdiction, right? So it's got to be something that you have a right to lawfully consider, which usually arises from what's in your regulations, okay? And then you have to prove that the public interest in that particular criterion and denying the application clearly outweighs the need for affordable housing. Really hefty burden, I'm going to tell you. And there's a lot of case law on it. Really hefty. And that those public interests cannot be protected by reasonable changes to the affordable housing development. Okay. So it's really important, again, that if you're thinking of denying an affordable housing application, that if you do believe there's something of significance, you have to determine that you've exhausted all opportunities to modify the application to address it in a satisfactory manner. Again, complete shift, 180 from what you all do on a regular basis. And again, as I mentioned to you, there may be an exception for an industrial zone. So if the commission doesn't satisfy its burden of proof under this section, the court shall, and it's not may, shall wholly or partly reverse, modify, remand, or reverse the decision from which the appeal was taken in a manner consistent with the evidence in the record before it. And I'm going to tell you, I've been in cases where when the court reverses it, if they feel that the commission basically denied the application because they just didn't want affordable units in their town, when they have reversed it, they haven't even given you the chance to go back and put reasonable conditions or reassess. There have been instances where they have said, you are to grant as applied for. So you need to, again, be very careful about weighing the pros and cons of pushing too hard and potentially losing the opportunity to make an affordable housing development, which is likely to be approved, not subject to any conditions whatsoever. Next slide, please. I feel like we missed a page somewhere. Give me 1 second. I'm thinking it's with
You want me to go back, Carrie?
So I feel like we skipped a slide, but so what I'm going to just tell you, and I don't mean to take this out of order, but I did do this research today just to update. So I just want you to be aware of what the median income means in this context, and especially with respect to Portland. So the Connecticut state median income from 2022 to 2023, it obviously depends on family size, but let's just say the average for family is 127,443. So as we had defined the median income, it means after adjustments for family size, the lesser of the state median income or the area median income for the area in which the municipality is located. Okay, so what that means is you have to look at the state median income when an application comes in, the current, and you also have to look at the area in which the municipality is located. And you're considered located in the Hartford, West Hartford, East Hartford, CT HUD, Metro, FMR area. And in 2023, the median family income in that area is $118,100. So what that, and then depending on the persons in the family, it also talks about, the income limits. So when you're looking at whether these are affordable units, and this goes to sort of the calculation discussion that we had, you have to first decide which median income applies. So you have to do the research and determine the state median income versus your area median income. And it's not based on Portland's median income. It's based on the area median income. Sorry about that. I didn't mean to digress, but I was getting concerned that we were moving into other areas. And I just feel like we missed that slide for some reason, Dan. Maybe that was my fault. Maybe I sent you the wrong version of the PowerPoint. I apologize. The other thing I want to say is, yeah. Okay, so my apologies. I think I might have sent you the wrong version. I think it's missing a few slides that I inserted when I updated this. I thought I looked at that, but I apologize to all of you. Okay. So
If you
what are
want
the,
to email me that and I can
yeah, and
put it
then
up now.
disseminate it. Yeah.
Okay.
Because I swear I looked at it, but I feel like, and I know it had the 21-29 updates in it. So I thought it was the right version, but I'm concerned now. So I apologize to all of you if it's not. So the basis to deny an application and meet that burden, as I said, it's got to be a significant health or safety issue, or it can be a failure to abide by the affordable housing statutes, meaning their affordability plan doesn't mesh, right? Or they don't provide an affordability plan. So again, it does require some analysis. The other thing you should realize, and this was a fight that we had in the Brenmore versus Lisbon case, is that our Supreme Court, in their infinite wisdom, took the Affordable Housing Act, which applies to planning and zoning commissions, et cetera, and applied it to local ordinances. So in this case, Lisbon had an ordinance that required certain construction requirements for driveways, and they objected to it and they appealed. And as I said, the Supreme Court in its infinite wisdom said, unless you have expert testimony stating that the reason for the driveway criteria that you're trying to enforce impacts significantly health or safety issues, you lose. And this was pivotal, right? Because not only does it now mean that there's a potential for an affordable housing application to impact local ordinances over which you as a commission don't even have control, but it also stands for the proposition that if you are going to deny an affordable housing plan, you must have expert testimony to back you up. It can't be pure conjecture. It can't be, we believe this is going to impact, public health and safety. There's got to be some solid evidence. Sorry, I have something in my eye. Okay. So again, as we talked about, modifications to the plan are allowed. And then if you impose modifications to the plan or conditions on the plan, to have them be upheld in a court of law, again, they have to go to significant health or safety issues, but they're going to win on overturning your modifications or conditions if those conditions or modifications will, quote, substantially and adversely impact the viability of the project. What does that mean? We have no precedent on that. We have no precedent on that. But I'm going to say, again, that I think you're going to have significant evidence in the record to support your position. And I, in another case, took a position that it's their burden to prove that it will substantially and adversely impact the viability of the project. And in that case, the court just swallowed whatever they said. They had no expert testimony. They just said it's gonna cost more if we have to do this. And that was enough for that court. Now, again, it was Superior Court. But you really don't have the upper hand with these applications. So the modifications and or conditions also have to outweigh the need for affordable housing. And when you deny an application for an affordable housing application or plan, within 15 days of the notice of denial, they have a right to come in with modifications that you're going to have to address, irrespective of timing or all of the other rules of how you conduct your proceedings on a normal application. So what does this really mean? And why is it important? I'm sure all of you appreciate the need for affordable housing, right? It's all over the news. And many of you may have young people in your family who are struggling. So I'm sure you can appreciate that, especially in Connecticut. We have high property taxes. But what it also means is that an affordable housing application or development could disrupt the orderly development of your town. Why? Because it can go anywhere. You may have spent, I don't know, a year on your plan of conservation and development and decided where multifamily housing is best suited. And they could come in and put it smack dab in the middle of a commercial zone that you had designated for some greater commercial purpose. Okay. And again, developers have significant leverage. So what are we going to do about it? Next slide, please. Okay. So again, the act doesn't apply to a municipality where you have a moratorium in place. And the moratorium is good for 4 years. As I said to you, you have to have qualifying affordable units. They're defined. They're calculated based on a very complicated formula. Certain affordable units get certain points and certain other ones get other points. I can't sit here and give you a dissertation on that. I have to go back, to the statutes and to the Department of Housing to figure it out. But it's complicated, but it can be done. And I've represented towns that have done it. Oh, okay. So in 2017, I'm sorry, I'm reading the slide too as I'm going through. You should also be aware that the Connecticut legislature passed Public Act 17170 that requires that once every 5 years, you prepare or amend an affordable housing plan. What is that? It's a plan as to how you are going to take affirmative steps to increase the number of affordable housing developments or units within your jurisdiction. Okay. And I'm sure Dan has probably already addressed that with you, but it's something that you should take very seriously. Next slide. Okay, so now we've got Public Act 2129, which changed the whole world of land use in so many ways. What it did was it modified the Zoning Enabling Act. Now you all might remember the old 8-2 where you could one of the criteria was your regulations should avoid congestion of the streets and this, that, the other thing. Well, they wiped that out. They don't want to hear about that anymore, right? It also is, so again, it eliminated the requirements that zoning regulations be designed to prevent overcrowding, be enacted with reasonable consideration of a district's character. You no longer can turn stuff down just because you don't think it's in character, or be enacted with reasonable consideration of conserving building values, meaning property, values of the abutting neighbors. All that's been wiped out. Okay. Now, your zoning regulations must provide for varied housing opportunities, affirmatively further the purposes of the Fair Housing Act, which is to provide, obviously, housing for persons of all shapes, sizes, disabilities, and income. They have to be designed to protect historic, tribal, cultural, and environmental resources, however, and they cannot prohibit cottage food operations in residential zones or place a cap on the number of dwellings in multifamily, middle, or mixed-use developments, or establish minimum floor areas required for dwelling units. And a lot of towns, and I'm not saying this was Portland, but a lot of towns were able to keep out affordable units simply by insisting that every housing unit meet a certain square footage. The bigger the square footage, the more costly the unit, the higher the rents, right? So if you wanted to sort of surreptitiously keep out Section 8 housing, you simply put a mandate that the floor area be more than could be afforded. And that's out. That's gone. It also makes accessory dwelling units permitted as of right, subject to opt-out provisions. And I had a discussion with Dan, and my understanding is You have not opted out of the changes brought about by Public Act 2129. So you are now subject to them. And what that means is they trump. So even if your regulations still say these things, it doesn't matter. They're trumped by the Public Act. So they're not enforceable. It also adds CEO certification requirements, biennial training for P&Z officials. It establishes a commission on Connecticut's development and future, and it clarifies requirements for municipal affordable housing plans. Meaning that now, well, I think that's the next slide. Go ahead. Okay. So to get back to that, what it means is now, if you don't have an affordable housing plan in a timely manner, you have to send an explanation to the Commissioner of Housing to explain why you haven't met the requirements. Now, I just want you to know back, I want to say it was Daniel Malloy. So it's got to be, 8 years? 8 years. He proposed penalties to towns that didn't foster affordable housing and affordable housing plans, meaning that your town would be denied state funding on certain items if you didn't have an affordable housing plan in place. That's how serious. And remember, Daniel Malloy was like from Stanford. So he was, in the thick of where all of this started. So that got shot down by the legislature. But what I'm suggesting to you is it may come about again. And so complying with these mandates is really important because it could impact things like getting your LoCIP money and other state grants if you don't comply. So why is planning for affordable housing important, right? So first of all, as we have discussed, Connecticut actually needs affordable housing. I don't think that's a question, right? Affordable housing trumps zoning, which is another reason that you have to take it very seriously. There are statutory requirements to affirmatively plan for affordable housing that we've discussed. As we said, the failure to comply could disrupt the orderly development of your town, deny residency to a skilled and diverse community, impact economic development, result in punitive sanctions. We don't know about the punitive sanctions yet, but it could happen. Increasing affordable housing could promote diversity, retain young people and seniors, and retain volunteers. Now, I will tell you that one of the towns that I've worked with, rather than worrying about keeping their young people, they couldn't keep their older people because their older people on fixed incomes couldn't afford to continue living in their town. And there are tax incentives for elders. You can give them discounts and that kind of thing. But these towns recognized that oftentimes your seniors, right, are the best people to be your volunteers. They're the ones who have the time, right? They're retired or whatever. They have the time. They have the knowledge. Oftentimes they've lived in your community for decades. So they know all about your town. And they have so much to offer. And they were finding in some of these towns that seniors couldn't live there, and they were losing the wealth of that knowledge and expertise on their boards and commissions. So it's, again, if you want to have a diverse community that is open to young people, middle income people, rich people, and seniors and others, looking at affordable housing is really important. Okay. And there's a quote here from the town of Salisbury's affordable housing plan. In fact, I think this was the town, if I'm remembering correctly, which really was focused on losing its really smart seniors. And the quote is, every town needs some diversity in its housing options. Housing needs vary greatly at different times in our lives. To retain diversity within our community, our town must provide the equivalent in its housing stock. With this flexibility, any change in family size, health, or employment puts us in danger of losing the members of our community we should be valuing the most: our teachers, our healthcare providers, our employees, and our volunteers. And they were really focused on the volunteers because so many of the volunteers were the seniors in their community. Next slide, please. So again, as we said, you have to prepare or amend your affordable housing plan once every 5 years. That plan has to show how you intend to increase the number of affordable units. You can hold as many public informational meetings as you like. Obviously, you have to provide proper notice. You have to regularly review and maintain that plan. And again, you have to send a letter to the Commissioner of Housing. If you fail to do so, that explains why. And down the road, there could be punitive damages for that. Next slide, please. So what I usually recommend to my towns is consider establishing either a subcommittee of your Planning and Zoning Commission or a separate commission or committee that is made up, of people in your community of diverse backgrounds, diverse economic status, diverse age or health status to do the work. Let them look into, what they think is missing or lacking and make some suggestions to you. Just an idea. You should set goals and define your objectives, like a time frame. Creation of an appropriate number of affordable units over a specified time. So think about it and be realistic. Now, how many affordable units is going to be your goal to create within the next 5 years, right? You need to determine the types of units. Are they going to be multifamily units, like condos with ownership rights, rental units, etc.? And I know a lot of that will be driven by whoever the property owner is and the developer is, but you do want to start considering what you deem to be most appropriate. And I'll tell you why, and where most appropriate. And I'll tell you why in a minute. You do want to consider appropriate sites, right? Because you're obviously going to want to think about suggesting where affordable housing developments can go based on sewer, water, transportation, right? It's easier when it's near Main Street to accommodate people of varying diverse backgrounds. Next slide. So affordable housing plan implementation. So you want to consider zoning text amendments and map amendments to encourage affordable housing or multifamily housing in specific areas, as we've talked about. You may want to consider tax incentives for multi-use housing developments. And there are statutes that allow you to do so. That would require an ordinance and a vote by the legislative body, but it is something to certainly think about if you really want to encourage affordable housing. Rehabilitation loans can also be garnered to promote improvements to existing affordable units. State funding to promote construction of affordable units. Partnerships with other nonprofits like Habitat for Humanity to get affordable units in. These are things that I just suggest that you think about as you're going through or amending your plan. Next slide, please. Okay. So the other thing that I strongly recommend to my towns, and many of them have implemented, is the notion that you might be able to reach a compromise on acquiring the affordable units without losing all control over the development in your town. And what I suggest to my towns is, in lieu of 830G, create zoning regulations that give incentives to developers to create affordable units, but still give you some control over the development, like where it's going to go. So creating an affordable housing zone, for example, I don't know what you want to call it, and saying, okay, we're not going to require 80%, we're not going to require 30% of the units be affordable. we're not going to require the deed restrictions be for 40 years. We'll give you a break. We'll say, if you give us 15% affordable for 30 years, we'll give you greater density to make it work and make it be affordable for the developer, as well as those who, and then you keep control in the sense that you say, but it's still going to be by special permit. So we get to look at and help design the plan. We get to decide where the driveways are going to go. We get to say that you still have to comply with setbacks. We get to say that you still, have to decide with, comply with, to a certain extent, building coverage perhaps, or certain open space requirements. But what that does is it makes it more financially feasible for the developer, because affordable housing projects can be costly for the developer too. Sometimes they just can't do it. They can't get enough units to make it work. So if you offer them an option that makes it financially feasible for them to put affordable units in your town, but while you can still maintain control over varying aspects of the project, it's a win-win, right? So, and again, with these types of regulations, you want to consider infrastructure, sewer, water, transportation, the areas where if you create this affordable housing zone, and maybe it's a floating zone, right? That just requires a minimum acreage and gives you those density bonuses. Okay. And again, it allows you to some degree to have better control over traffic considerations, buffering considerations from abutting properties. And I have found that this has worked really well. So just consider when you're looking at your plan, putting in there that you're going to create an affordable housing zone, potentially. One that doesn't necessarily have to comply with 830G, but nonetheless creates affordable units. Next slide, please. We've got 10 minutes. Does anybody have any questions or comments? And again, please feel free to comment if you have ideas or suggestions, because I learned from you too. I mean, you're down in the trenches, so.
I have a question.
Sure.
Hi, I'm Barbara Sequenzia. So I'm wondering about where the building's going now in the former Elmcrest property, and how much of that is affordable housing?
I'm afraid Dan's going to have to answer that because it's been a decade since I've looked. No, it's been many years since I've looked at the plan, and I know it has changed a bit. And I'm going to say the nice thing about the Elmcrest property, and I know you've all been very frustrated, is I was down in the trenches with that when it first evolved. And at that time, it was Deanna who was the director of zoning. And one of the things we were really stuck on was that it should be a mixed use development. You wanted to have like a community mixed use development. And so there was a requirement that for every residential unit they create, they had to create a certain amount of commercial space. And there was also a goal of preserving historic structures on the site, as I'm sure you know. And so I think you also know they've come back to you maybe 2 or 3 times and tried to sort of backtrack on the commercial part of the development. And they're really focused on the residential. But I cannot, for the life of me, remember what, if any, dedication there was to affordable units. Dan, I'll turn it over to you.
None of the units are affordable. They are all market rate. One of the things the developer did do during the process of trying to get an approval that he wanted was he did kind of threaten zoning at one point with I think it was like a 436 unit all residential development, which had an affordable component to it. But yeah, the 240 units as planned right now, none of them are affordable.
Okay, that's too bad.
It is.
Well,
It is.
yeah, it makes it more difficult for the town in the end to reach its goal. because we're adding 240 more non-affordable units plus, any
Right.
houses that are being built currently. So it actually kind of put us further behind the ball of ever getting to that 10%.
I had another question too. So, Carrie, did you say that the wetlands are not protected? If someone comes in, and wants to do affordable housing?
No, just the opposite. So if I misstated, I apologize. No, it's wetlands. The Wetlands Commission is not subject to 830G. So
Okay,
that reflects the fact that the legislature appreciated that they were not going to put affordable units in the middle of a swamp and in any way usurp the Inland Wetlands Act.
okay, great. Thank you.
Oh, I thought I was going to get something from Cynthia there. Oh,
I'm just curious about if a resident of an affordable unit's income goes up over the requirements, then what happens?
so they're supposed to get kicked out, or
Get taxed. So somebody actually track that.
I'm sorry.
That's part of an administrative requirement then. Do you have to track someone's family income?
So this is why they're supposed to designate somebody in their affordability plan to oversee the administration. But I'm going to be honest with you, Cynthia. I could see a whole host of problems there.
Yeah, that's
100%. Who's going to police this stuff,
Hmm.
right? And the legislature didn't see fit to force them to report to the state on an annual basis, which I think is the appropriate thing. They should be reporting to HUD. We still have X number of units, and here's the income of the residents who live there. I think they should have to do that. And I always insist in the affordability plan that they do submit something to the town on an annual basis. Because again, it's a fluid thing, because the rent that they can charge depends to some degree on the size of the family, the income, right? So somebody leaves a unit, a different family comes in, it's a new analysis. And I think you have every right to request of them. But can you imagine the work that puts on Dan's plate? I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot.
Mm.
And when it comes to this, it's not just about rental units, it's the sale of units. So if you're talking about single family homes or condos, it's the same thing. There's supposed to be deed restrictions. Who's following it? Right? Who's making sure? So unless, I don't know, Dan gets an assistant who's willing to go out there and track all this stuff down, the enforcement of it to me it's problematic.
In Portland's case, I think a lot of our affordable units are derived from our housing authority, the two housing authority apartment complexes that we have. So a lot of that is from those two units, the Chatham Court, and then the one right off of Main Street at the intersection of 66 and Main. I can't recall what that one is called.
Quarry something.
Quarry Heights.
Quarry Heights. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm just curious, how many of you are concerned about affordable housing at this point?
I am,
Sorry, Joan, you go.
and I recently read an article about housing development in Austria, where people have to qualify to get in to begin with.
Mhm.
But if their circumstances change and their income goes up, they are allowed to stay. And what I like about that is that we're not creating a sort of a low income ghetto by, only allowing people with low incomes to all live together. I like the idea of multi incomes, just like, multiracial. I think it just makes for a better community in the end.
Let me just tell you this, Joan, to appease you.
Yeah.
The Affordable Housing Act does require that the affordable units be intermingled in the development. So, okay, so, and they are supposed to appear from the outside as
Mhm.
the same as the other units. What does that mean? It means the developer can put granite in the full rent ones and laminate in the right kitchen counters in the affordable ones, right? Not the top grade, marble showers, maybe it's just tile or whatever. Or the plastic inserts or whatever. But from the outside, they're not only supposed to be intermingled, but they are supposed to be indistinguishable. So to your point, Joan, it should, when you've got full market rate living with affordable units, and remember, this is workforce units. It's not Section 8 that we're really talking about here. So you're talking about your teachers, right? Living amongst people who are paying full market rents. It's not a ghetto by any means, because the 70% of those units are full market. So to appease you on that, and
Okay.
I probably should have said that in my preamble, but hopefully that gives you a better level of comfort.
A little bit.
Good.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Anybody else have a comment or a question? Well, let's see. Oh,
Kurt,
Kurt does.
Muted.
you're muted.
I have a comment regarding the last question, and when you get involved in that type of housing where you have market versus affordable. Did you say that the affordable units can be modified to be less expensive to build versus the market? And are the market units, are they for sale in the sense of a condo type of situation? Or because I look at it this way, if I go in as market, if I buy a unit at market at 200,000 or whatever the rent is at $2,000, and I look at my next door neighbor who basically has the same type of unit and he's only paying $1,000, doesn't that create some type of a disparity and problem regarding affordability? Shouldn't
No.
the market person pay the same as a affordable?
So the problem is, Kurt, and I hear what you're saying. The problem is that if that was the case, there would never be affordable housing developments. You would be back to Section 8 housing, because the only thing that drives these types of developments is the ability to mix the affordable units with the mix the affordable units with the market units. If they can't make enough money on the market units, they can't build the affordable units because they're taking a hit.
No, I understand the whole theory and so on and so forth, but don't you create some type of okay, I got the same, I'm paying twice as much for the same as you.
That you can thank your legislature for. That you can thank your but keep in mind, many of these people are just at 80% of median income. Okay, so it's not like
you mean the market people?
I'm sorry.
Do you mean the market people are paying only 80%?
No, what I'm saying
I'm not
is
sure I understand.
many of the people who are renting the affordable units qualify because they're at 80% of median income. So you're not talking about poor people. You're just talking about poorer people who can't afford. Think about a teacher who's trying to rent a condo in Fairfield. with the,
No,
I
I
mean,
get it. I understand.
yeah,
that.
yeah. So the nice thing about the Affordable Housing Act requirements are that it does try to eliminate the perceived disparity. It's not sticking everybody who's not at median income in a development together as if they're, dirt. It's mixing them appropriately and diversifying their housing arrangements with people who can afford market. And so that they're not, in a sense, being outwardly isolated because of their income, right? So to me, that's the best part of this, is the fact that it requires that they be intermingled. Otherwise, if there ever were a development built that was based solely on affordable units, those, it would be, that's the affordable development. You know what I mean? That's the lesser people. Whereas with this, outwardly, everybody looks the same. It just means that they don't necessarily get all of the amenities that on the inside of their units that somebody who's paying full market rent might get. The little tweaks, the little special things. Instead of hardwood floors, maybe they're getting.
It's like it'd be like just buying a basic car versus a car with all the bells and whistles, is what you're saying.
Or
Okay,
buying
I understand.
buying a small ranch in your town as opposed to a McMansion. Right? Same idea. But the nice thing about this is outwardly, nobody knows unless you invite them in. Nobody knows that you're in the ranch as opposed to the McMansion. And to me, that's like one of the biggest. I'm sorry, go ahead.
When a developer submits an application for an affordable or even a mixed use, do they also have to include in their data or potentially rate hikes?
Rate heights in rent? Yeah.
Correct.
So my assumption would be that they would have the right to raise the rents whenever the calculations based on median income justify it. So,
Okay.
but I cannot tell you that there's a requirement that they do that. And again, to the other side of that coin is if the median income in Connecticut drops, there's nothing in the regulations that says that they have to give everybody a break either.
Okay. No, I was more concerned looking at costs running a building goes up based on taxes and increase in taxes and increase on maintenance and so on and so forth. That's where I was going with that. Is there a calculation regarding that potential
So
5-year plan, 10-year plan, whatever?
So as we talked about, the total rent can't be more than 30% of their income expenditure. And so that would include all costs and expenses. And just so you know, it also includes, if they charge everybody, let's say they have underground parking, and everybody has a market rate unit has to pay $50 a month for parking. That's not considered outside the scope of expenses. Some of the expenses that are outside the scope is like cable, that kind of thing, because people choose what they want to choose for cable service or telephone or whatever. But if they have specific amenities on site that everybody has to kick in for, that's included in that calculation. So again, there's no way to outwardly distinguish an affordable unit from a market rate unit unless the occupant shares that information. So, and that again, to me, is like the biggest plus, because you want to treat these people, you want to treat your teachers, your firefighters, your policemen, your local healthcare workers. You want to treat them the same as the millionaires, that live in your town. And again, I'm referring to Fairfield County. You want to appreciate them. You want them there. You want them to work for your community. And if they can't afford to live there, it reduces the quality of life for all of us.
Yeah, no, I understand. I'd be more concerned on that level, and then include especially seniors and being able to keep them in town.
Exactly.
Um,
But they
and the affordability that way.
exactly. I'm going to tell you, as a land use attorney, I am more concerned about where a multifamily development goes in my town or any of the towns I represent than I am about who lives in them. To me, that's a bigger planning problem. And that's why the fact that 830G robs you of your control is so concerning to me. Because you go through this planning process, you decide what areas of town, should be this or should be that. Elmcrest is a perfect example. And somebody can just waltz in and say, give you the middle finger and do whatever they want and screw up your entire plan for the future of your community. To me, that's more concerning than having affordable units in a multifamily development where some people are at 80% or 60% of median income. To me, that's, and again, when you have that kind of mixed development, and I don't mean to, if I'm going to insult anybody, I apologize. This is just my experience. When you have that kind of mixture where you've got people paying market rents who care about their building and care about how it looks and care about upkeep and care about the community, it makes it a lot harder for somebody who's at lower income not to keep up with that standard, right? They're going to be the outlier, and chances are there's going to be administrative fallout for it, or there's going to be a condo association that's going to kick them in the butt. But to me, to Joan's point, when you get these developments where everybody in there is like Section 8 subsidy and have no money to spend and are barely getting by, the status of that kind of a development tends to go downhill. Not because they don't care about where they live, but because they don't have the means to care for it. So again, the mixture to me is the big plus. But where they go, that to me is where that's where your focus on control should be. And in order to incentivize these types of developments to go where you want them is why I suggest creating zoning regulations that are more appealing than 830G.
So what are some of the criteria that other towns have used for deciding where they want them?
So as I have said to you, a lot of it goes
a really loaded issue to me.
Well, no. So you have a plan of conservation and development, right? You have zones, you have residential zones, you have zones that allow multifamily, right? And you have zones that don't, correct?
Mhm.
So in my mind, what you would want to do is incentivize any type of an affordable housing development to go in the zones where you had already contemplated multifamily developments. And those usually are areas that are close to, the infrastructure that supports a multifamily development, sewer, water, transportation, even services,
Mhm.
human services, right? So to me, that's the critical thing. Because to put 460 units smack in the middle of a field of single family homes, to me, the impact where there's no public water or sewer. So now you've got to have, this huge community well and a, big septic system. And then you got to worry about, whether it's going to hold up, whether you're, and I know Portland's very concerned about their groundwater. They're doing a lot of well drilling and that kind of thing. So that to me is the bigger concern. It's not, Section 8 housing, I'd probably be concerned about too, again, for the reasons I said, because everybody in Section 8 housing is going to be in a less than ideal situation, and they're virtually at poverty. They're below 50%. But 60 to 80 in a mixed development where you got people who have the means, along with people who are just at, where they can afford, to me is it's a good solution.
So sewer infrastructure is not one of the criteria that's that eliminates all these requirements.
No, because it's something you should consider, but it's not something that would allow you to deny
Um,
an 830G application. As long as they can establish that they can provide sufficient,
alternative.
yeah. If they can't, well, now you're in a different, that could be a reason to deny.
Well, having everything, having these zones in an infrastructure that already exists is to Portland's advantage, because we don't have enough customers at this point to pay for the water and the sewer systems that we have. So it probably makes sense to concentrate on centering these zones in areas where we already have the infrastructure.
And again, you're gonna have to make it more attractive for a developer than 830G. And 830G can be tough on developers. It's, it's a financial, hurdle for them to make money based on the ratio. So, but in my experience, if you give them a break and say, okay, instead of 30%, if you go here and you do this and you meet our special permit criteria and you give us 15% or 20% affordable units, we're good to go, then it gives you the opportunity to land these types of developments where you want them, potentially.
So I have one last question. And you could probably say it's my responsibility to do my own research, but if you could point us to information about places that you think have done a really good job at establishing these kinds of guidelines, I would really appreciate that.
I would never tell you it's your job to do your own research. I would say it's Dan's job to do your research. That's what I would say. No, I'm kidding. Is Dan still here? Did he sign off?
No, yeah, of course I'm still here.
The first time that jumps off the top of my head is Avon, but I will tell you their first application, the neighbors didn't want that either. That's the first one that jumps off the top of my head, but I will think about it and I'll get that information over to Dan for you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I will make sure to distribute any information Carrie provides to both boards. If there are, I guess, no other questions, I do appreciate everybody taking the time for this training.
Make
And
sure
we're
you
gonna
mark
stop.
down it's 1 hour and 15 minutes. Don't deny the
This is
15 minutes.
this is only an hour. It's only an hour, so we got 3 more
An
of
hour
these.
and 15
And,
minutes, Dan, darn it.
we're getting our bang for our buck here. So I do appreciate it, and thank you very much, Carrie. That was very informative, and yeah, I hope everybody has a great night.
It was nice to
Bob,
meet you.
enjoy Maine for all of us, Bob.
Thank you, I will. And thank you, Carrie, very much.
You're
Thank you.
welcome, Bob. You're all welcome.
Thank you.
You
Thank
bet.
you. Good night.